Welcome to the People Forward Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. As an expert in transformational leadership and human development, and the creator of People Forward Leadership, I'm here to help you create thriving, engaged teams and unstoppable leaders. In each episode, we'll explore the strategies and insights that will elevate your leadership impact and drive lasting results. Get ready for a transformative journey filled with actionable steps. Let's go. Welcome to the podcast. I often say that growth always comes out in the messy middle, not in the planning stage or the retreat or not after you figured everything out, but in the mess, through the mess, actually. In fact, I think that's the purpose of the messy middle. The hard part, however, is that I think that most leaders try to resist it instead of allowing themselves to actually sit in it. And sitting in it means not rushing to a resolution or jumping to some perceived happy ending, because let's be honest, there's no such thing, but actually staying present to whatever the mess is trying to teach you, train you for, or strengthen in you. When you avoid the mess, you limit your growth edges. You undermine all of your growth opportunities. I mean, that's where it happens. And ultimately, you stay exactly where you are, not growing, not changing, not evolving, just where you are. And that's what we're going to unpack in this episode. And we're going to do it through the lens of a few of my guests from this season of the podcast, specifically Shawn Donaghy, Donishea Martinez, and Traci Rossi. As I reflected on their episodes, I felt that each one of them showed a different version of their own messy middles and what becomes possible when you stop trying to get out of it and instead allow yourself to actually go through it. So let's start with the messiness of conflict. And we're going to talk about three different messes. And the first one is the messiness of conflict. Now, when it comes to conflict, I'm not talking about the dramatic kind that is a huge blow up that ultimately lands you in HR. What I'm talking about is the everyday subtle kind, the insidious conflict, if you will, the disagreement in the room that nobody names, the tension between two people on a team that everybody can feel, but nobody wants to address, the feedback that needs to be given, but it keeps getting pushed back week after week after week, the toxic positivity of niceness that people don't want to say things because they don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. The conflict that has actually built up more in your mind because you think it's going to be huge and horrible to manage, but in reality, this is really a conversation. Now, most of us were taught explicitly, or just by watching other leaders around us, that conflict is bad, that is evil, it's something to get through as fast as possible, something to smooth over, to manage down, and especially to avoid at all costs. In fact, most leaders feel that if their team is engaging in conflict, they're doing something wrong. They're not realizing that healthy conflict is a sign of psychological safety. There are such things as bad conflict when there's not resolution or people don't know how to manage their emotions or have conversations. That's not good conflict. But healthy conflict is something different, and you want that. You want to be able to teach your people how to engage in healthy conflict. Somewhere along the way, we picked up the message that conflict means something's broken, and that if you're in conflict, something is wrong with your communication or your leadership. But that's not true. And Shawn Donaghy, the CEO of North County Transit District, confirmed that for me. In fact, he doesn't try to eliminate conflict. He said he actually recruits for it. Shawn said, if we don't have disagreements, speaking of himself as a leader, then you're the wrong person in the chair. I'm the wrong person in that chair. Now, that's not something you read in a leadership book. Disagreement isn't a sign that something's broken. It's a sign that two people are actually thinking, are actually communicating, are actually problem solving. And when Shawn arrived at North County Transit District, one of the first things he noticed was that people didn't feel comfortable raising concerns or issues or problems. They see something was off, something that needed to be addressed, and they just stayed quiet. They didn't speak up because the culture had taught them that raising problems was risky, that raising problems was causing conflict. So as a result, problems just festered and boiled up until they were sometimes unmanageable. And his response wasn't to demand more candor or hope for the best. He decided to put his leadership team through crucial conversations training, not to teach people how to fight, but how to build conflict fluency. The ability to stay in hard conversations without collapsing, avoiding them, or letting them turn destructive. To get comfortable with conflict and not see it as something bad or something that needs to be avoided. And conflict doesn't live in a vacuum. It requires something from the leader before it can exist safely inside the organization. And what's required is vulnerability. Having hard conversations takes vulnerability. Sitting in discomfort takes vulnerability. And admitting when you've got it wrong, publicly, clearly, without hedging, that takes vulnerability. But that willingness to be exposed is exactly what signals to people that it's safe to do the same. When a leader models it, they're not just sharing a moment of humility. They're giving the entire organization permission to disagree, object, raise concerns, and tell some hard truths. Shawn understood this. Before any of his people could show up with candor, he had to go first. Standing in front of 300 employees and saying, listen, I got it wrong. Here's what I was thinking. Here's what I missed. Now help me fix it. Wasn't just an act of accountability. It was an act of trust building. He was laying the groundwork for an organization where people don't have to hide what's not working because the person at the top doesn't hide it either. That's what makes conflict productive rather than destructive. Not a policy, not a process, but through a leader willing to admit and be seen in the mess first. Now, next, I want to talk about the messiness of learning in real time. This one can be particularly hard to admit to because it can often feel like you're losing your footing, losing your North Star, the thing that has always defined you, what you believed you could always count on. That story you build up in your head that says you've been successful, you built a track record, you have a leadership style that works, you have a winning combination. And then all of a sudden, the context changes. There's a new structure, new complexity, new ambiguity, and then suddenly everything you thought you knew doesn't work anymore. That playbook that made you so successful before just isn't landing the same way. And at that point, you're faced with a choice. You have to ask yourself, do I keep running the same playbook that always worked for me before? Do I keep pretending that I have all the answers and know exactly what to do? Or do I accept the fact that what got me here is not going to get me there? And that it's time to embrace the role of student, of learner again. That's the messy middle of adaptive leadership. And Donishea Martinez, an executive at Genentech, lived it. When her entire field team shifted into a new matrix model, she walked in as someone who had earned her authority. A track record of building high-performing teams, she knew how to lead. But the environment demanded something she hadn't fully practiced. Not leading from her experience, but learning how to lead from curiosity. She told me you can't lead out of fear, but that's what she was doing exactly. When the ground shifts underneath you, your instinct is to grip tighter, right? To lean into and default into what you know. Prove you belong in the room by performing the version of leadership that got you there to begin with. But when you do that, you're leading through fear and with ego. But that fear-driven default to the old playbook is exactly what will prevent your growth in both yourself and in your people around you. What Donishea did instead was much harder. She got still and she got honest about what she didn't know yet. She stopped trying to perform expertise and started practicing curiosity. And that messiness, listen, it's hard. I've seen leaders struggle with it because it can cause an identity crisis, a questioning of all of your successes, wondering if you were ever a good leader. Could you be a good leader in the future? Was it all just a fluke? It can feel like weakness or failure. It's that tension that most leaders really want to avoid and get out of. And what they do is that they may start to avoid their responsibilities, they may stop showing up, and actually allow others to take up the slack for them as they kind of hide and disappear in the background. Or worse, they may just decide to quit, thinking they're just not cut out to be a leader. But it's not failure, it's just messy. And actually, the most advanced leadership move you can make in that moment is to sit in the messy middle of your leadership. Because real adaptive learning, not the compliance training kind, it requires a leader who is willing to be uncomfortable, who can sit in not knowing without pretending otherwise, who can model for their team that growth is not a destination you arrive at. It's a practice that you return to over and over and over again. It's an iterative approach to leadership. Think of it as a cycle. You learn, you apply, you discover. And then you learn, you apply, and you discover. It's a cycle. You're always going to be in this iterative process. You don't arrive. You continue to grow and to practice that growth. And in the messy middle of that learning and discovering is where you come out to apply and see what works and what doesn't. Every time the context changes, you need to do this. Every time the old playbook stops working, you need to do this. And yes, it's scary. And yes, it's messy. But on the other side is your new level of leadership, an evolved level of leadership. What Donishea described on the other side of that season wasn't just that she was stronger. It was that her team trusted her more, precisely because she had shown them what it looked like to keep growing under pressure. That's the return on staying in the messiness of adaptive learning. Not the performative leader pretending as if they have all the answers, but the growth leader that you're modeling through the mess. Now, the final and the third kind of mess is the quietest and often the most dangerous because it doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly in direct proportion to your success. I call it the messiness of maintaining trust. It usually starts with big growth in your organization, where there's more complexity, more responsibility, more time spent in rooms with boards, executives, and partners, and less time spent in the hallways, or the informal check-ins, or the conversations that aren't on anyone's agenda. And before long, you're nothing more than a title instead of a leader. You're just a function. You're a mystery. And the people closest to the work stop feeling seen and known by the person at the top. And here's where it can get costly. When people don't feel connected to their leader, they stop trusting their direction. When they stop trusting their direction, they disengage from the mission. And when they get disengaged from the mission, you start losing your best people first. Because listen, high performers always have an option. And the ones who stay, well, they start filling the silence. Rumors form, silos harden, and people stop raising issues because, listen, nobody's listening anyway. The leader, now further removed, starts interpreting this as a performance problem, as an employee problem, and your employees begin interpreting the leadership's absence as a lack of them actually caring. Each side blames the other, and let's be honest, neither side at this point is entirely wrong. What you're left with is the full spiral of low engagement, high turnover, a fractured culture, and eventually a reputation that precedes you in the worst possible way. Basically, what you have is a mess. And the most painful part of that, leaders either don't see it coming, or when they do, they don't deal with it immediately or deal with it well. They're not pulling away intentionally. They're just managing up or trying to execute strategy or solve the problems right in front of them. Distance isn't a decision, it just became the default, which is exactly why catching it and choosing differently in that moment to say, stop, this has gone too far, let me dive into the mess, and choosing not to ignore or avoid it is such a defining leadership act and such a necessary leadership act. That's what Traci Rossi, executive director of Friends of the Children in Portland, did. She leads one of the most admired nonprofits in the region, and 11 consecutive years of being voted the most admired is exactly why she has that title. And at some point, she looked up and noticed a distance has started to grow. Her responsibilities had expanded. The informal touch points that she used to have with her people were disappearing, and she knew she had to do something different. She said, I didn't want my leadership to be a mystery. So what she did was to reinstate what she did years ago when she first started, which is what she calls friendly 15s. And these are 15 minutes with every member of her staff on a regular cadence, not to check on performance, not to move work forward, but just to stay in relationship with her people. So they didn't lose touch of her and she didn't lose touch of them. She did this because she knows that you can't build a culture without people telling you the truth. If your only contact with them is just through tasks or no contact at all. Trust isn't built in all hands-on meetings or performance reviews. It's built in those 15 minutes, in those small conversations, those micro opportunities of getting to know people. That's where leaders have an opportunity to really stay tuned to the pulse of what's happening in their organization. But most leaders think they're too busy to have these type of conversations because they have so many other competing obligations. Really, as Traci was telling me this, it just reminded me, and it was a full story and a nod back to what she shared about the community her grandmother built and fostered in the beauty salon she had in the community. It's remembering what someone told you 6 months ago and then asking about it again. It's being present in a conversation that has no immediate deliverables. Now, I know this creates tension between leaders who want to be available and those who are drowning in legitimate demands. There's always something more urgent, more visible, more measurable pulling at your attention. I get that. But relationship level work rarely screams the loudest, but it needs the most attention. So, unfortunately, because it doesn't scream the loudest, it gets deprioritized. Not out of negligence, but out of the relentless math of your packed calendar. And over time, when it starts to build up, avoidance, it just gets easier. You get used to the distance. You actually look forward to the distance because you don't want to deal with the mess that got created because of the distance. You build workarounds. You tell yourself the team is fine, the work is moving, and things are holding together. But what you're really doing is choosing the short-term comfort of not diving in over the long-term return of actually doing it. Because when you do go in, when you stay in relationship, when you make the time and show up for those 15-minute conversations that wasn't on your calendar, you actually come out more connected, more informed, and a better leader as a result. In this case, the mess becomes the actual medicine. Those friendly 15s aren't a program. They're an example of a leader diving into the messy middle, refusing to let organizational growth become the excuse for why she stopped showing up for her people. So there you have it. Those are the tensions. Those are the messy middles that you have to be comfortable learning how to spot, but also how to sit in so that on the other end, you can find growth. Here's what I want to leave you with. The messy middle isn't a sign that something's wrong with your leadership. It is your leadership, at least the part that actually develops you into a great leader. The ridiculous notion that you always have to be right, you always have to have the answer, always have to look like you've got it together, that's what keeps you from just facing the messy middle, but being okay while you're in it. Shawn stayed in the conflict mess and built a culture of truth-telling. Donishea stayed in the learning mess and came out as a leader her team trusted more. And Traci stayed in the trust mess and chose relationships over convenience. All three of them could have taken the easy exit, but none of them did. And that's the question I want to leave you with today. Where are you taking the easy exit right now? What tension are you smoothing over or avoiding? What discomfort are you rushing past? What messiness are you trying to avoid or clean up before you've learned what it has to teach you? That's where your next leadership is. Not on the other side of the mess, but in the willingness to stay in it. I want to thank you for joining me, and until next time, keep leading people forward. I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the People Forward Leadership Podcast. If you're ready to implement the insights and strategies shared in today's episode, schedule a call with our team to explore how we can help you drive talent retention, boost engagement, and develop extraordinary people-forward leaders in your organization. Plus, be sure to visit our website to access additional resources that will support your growth goals. Until next time, Keep leading your people with purpose and confidence. And remember, when your people thrive, organizational success is inevitable.